Is the sport of boxing in trouble? This is the first ever Cornermen, and we have some aficionados in the sport. So let's get into it this time on the Cornermen. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the first ever installment of the Cornermen, your boxing-specific podcast related to the I&C sports paradigm, or the Iceman and Coach main show, Offspring. This is the Iceman, Matt Frates. The coach is not here because the coach does not do boxing. However, we are here because I have two gentlemen who are aficionados in the sport who are here to talk about the finest of sports, and that is boxing. And right now, in the studio with me, here to my left, is Clev, Wason, who is the host of the manual and co-host of Political Football. And on the camera, we have Supreme Rich with us to talk about all things old school boxing. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. How you doing?
Good, man. What's going on?
How you making out today?
You know, we're doing pretty good over here. It took us a little bit to get this rolling. This idea has been in our brains for, like a year and a half now?
Just about. And
since things in boxing only happen about once every 6 months, we had sometimes no reason to get together. But this is a boxing show. And normally on Iceman and Coach, we talk about general sports. And so we don't feel like we have to be qualified to talk about these things. But if we're going to come to you with something more specific and tell you that we know more than you do about boxing, well, you know what? We damn well better have some bona fides. And so I want the two gentlemen to give you their bona fides because I am definitely not the elder statesman of this. So, Supreme, I want to start with you. How did you get into boxing, and kind of tell us everything that you want to tell us about how you got to this place today in your life and your relationship with the sport of boxing?
Gotcha. All right, let's see. We can start from the beginning. Now, I'm a kid that started boxing at 2 years old. I was a person that probably was supposed to go pro because I started early, and that was my first love. Once I put the gloves on, once my dad had me in the mix, I fell in love with the sport, and I dove in ever since. So I got a lot of years of knowledge. I'm an old man now. I don't know how old I look on camera, but I ain't a young boy no more.
Look
But
at
yeah,
me.
a lot of years, Thank you very much. Thank you. Hopefully the ladies feel the same thing. Oh, yeah. Like I said, I've been fighting very early. Dad showed me a lot of things. I took it and ran with it. Little gym rat for a lot of years. And, man, I fell in love early. There's fighters that brought me in the game. I kind of got my first fighter that I really ran behind was Thomas the Hitman Hearns. And I kind of started formulating my style after him, but I'm more of a puncher boxer. I gravitate to fighters who hit hard, who don't duck anybody. I like real men in the sport. I don't like this new stuff where people don't want to fight each other. They want to get an easy check on somebody you don't know. And then when you get a good fight, sometimes the ref do too much, and then sometimes the judges do too little. So, yeah, I got a lot of years all the way up to now, and I'm very appreciative that you guys put me on board here. First time doing something like this. Hopefully, I can do you guys good.
I think you will, man. Now, you got to know that Cleve here vouched for your excellence in this sport. And from what I understand, you are a world-class player of Fight Night. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely a gamer, so I still play with that, too. I'm pretty high up in that game.
So, Cleve, it sounds like he's pretty entitled to be able to speak here. So it's familiar for you, too, isn't it?
I was about 7 years old, just new to America, getting teased a lot. My name Cleveland, and I used to stutter, stammer, whatever you want to call it. And, getting chased home by the kids. And then, my pops actually has a pedigree in boxing, rest in peace. But he trained fighters in the 70s. And then he had a couple of guys in the early 90s. And I've always been around the gym, always been working, and to this day, I mean, I'm not no stranger to putting on some gloves or getting in the mix.
And I can attest to that. So I'm here not only because I'm a great podcast host and moderator, but about 7 years ago, Cleve, you and I linked up through one of your ads about your personal training. And I was kind of coming off of a marathon running career, I would say, because it was a good 6 years where I ran 7 marathons and like 30 half marathons, a little humble brag, And I was into doing something else. And I started picking up the gloves with you. I'd never picked up a pair of gloves in my life. And 7 years later, I think I've done a pretty good job of making myself into somebody who can handle himself if the time were to arise to do that. And I've done a lot of study. Remember when we first got together, I was watching, YouTube videos and film. I'm on beach vacations texting them about, hey, I watched this fight, I watched this fight, just trying to soak up the sport because there's a lot of things that I misunderstood about the sport of boxing growing up. And I never was really, I guess, given the opportunity to understand it. I had to do it myself and study it. So that's how we are here, and that's why we are qualified to talk to you today. And I think it's pretty awesome how we all came together. Now, I remember we had a call, a little behind the curtain stuff for everybody. God, it's like a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. We had a call because Clev wanted me to talk to Rich so that Rich could basically decide if I was good enough to be doing this with you guys. And so I got the seal of approval from Supreme himself. So I think we are ready to go here on this episode. Now, I want to start by talking about the state of boxing. Now, there's a lot of things that can go into that, Rich, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on where the sport of boxing is, because you two grew up in an era in which it was appointment television. And for the two of you, it still is appointment television. But on the national landscape, it is not that anymore. Where 40 years ago, heavyweight fight night, that was everybody watched that. Like you had to watch it now. And with the UFC overtaking it and many other factors going into it, I think boxing is kind of in trouble in some ways. And so I want to talk about that before we get into some of the fights that have happened over this past year. So, Cleve, I want to start with you. Kind of where do you think that the sport is, and just your take on the state of boxing compared to what it was when you were a kid?
I definitely was with Sentiment Supreme's comment earlier about how the sport is not what it used to be. I mean, you have guys that are champions and they're overlooking whoever that they don't want to fight. They're not being forced to fight fights because back in the day you got stripped if you didn't fight somebody. You got literally your title was taken away from you. Now you could pick and choose and handpick your opponents for whatever reason. Where they're not a draw or I'm a draw. The money is going to be more on my side or whatever it is. Where back in the day, guys basically wanted to be champion and they wanted to be the best. They didn't care who they fought, where they fought. They would go to England, they would go to Scotland, they would go anywhere to fight. But nowadays, guys don't want to fight. I remember Miguel Cotto, he never fought outside New York City. And he always fought in Madison Square Garden for some reason, and you had to come to him, when he was a champion. So, and if you wasn't willing to do that because you don't want the home cooking, you didn't do it. So boxing is definitely in trouble. It's been in trouble for a long time, and it's basically because the sport has no oversight, no regulation, no governing body, because everybody could get a belt and then name a champion. So it's kind of been always weird with that.
Pretty sure they just did that in my neighborhood. I'm pretty sure my neighborhood has a champion that I can go fight and take the belt off of. But Supreme, to you.
That's how it works now. That's how it works.
It is how it works now. And it's true, though, because these guys come walking in sometimes and you're like, what is that? Like, did he just buy that at Party City? Like, that's something that they just made. And it's like, I'm the whatever the fuck champion. But Supreme, to you, I want your rebuttal on things that I said and also things that Cleve said about boxing and kind of where we are and how you feel about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, over the years, boxing, back in the day when me and Cleve was really heavy into it, fighters wanted to be the best. And the only way you be the best is by fighting the best. And what has changed is fighters learn now that you don't have to fight the best to be the best. They tarnish the belts by letting anybody get the belt. And these guys are able to make money fighting whoever they want. So being that you can make a substantial amount of money fighting whoever, and you really don't care to be the best guy out there, you rather go to social media and just promote yourself as the best, and then your fan base is going to assume and say you the best. They're happy with that. They're happy with the fake, the phony, the make it up stuff. And because of that, man, boxing is hurting because we need boxing to be controlled by one entity that will force these guys to fight each other. And if they don't fight, I'm all for making it so they can't fight. If you ain't gonna fight this guy, the number one ranked guy, then you know what? Your license is gonna be taken. We ain't gonna just take your belt from you because these guys are able to fight without the belt and generate money. Take these guys' ability to generate money, then we can force them to fight. Every sport you see, football, basketball, baseball, end of the year, you know who the best is. Boxing, you can have 3-4 guys in the same division, a few pounds up or down, all claim to be the best and never fight each other. That's hard. That's what's a detriment to the sport. And then what you said about UFC got one person controlling them. That's UFC. UFC if I wanted to fight you, if you didn't want to fight me, they're going to put us in the ring if we both were able to generate money. If I'm scared of Cleve and Cleve want to fight, they're going to put us in the ring. They don't care what the fighters feel. It's all about them generating their revenue for the business. And I think boxing need to be more like that. Boxing need to have more control to be like, hey, if you want to be the best, you're going to fight the best, period. And if you don't fight, you don't fight at all. Force these men to get in the ring. Give us some type of Super Six tournament. Do something so every year or two we know who the best fighter is in each weight class. Boxing will come back the way it was.
That's a really good point, actually, in the fact that if you were to go down the street and do the Family Feud method and survey 100 people on these fighters, who is the best heavyweight fighter? How many of them would actually know that? Because these guys are not household names the way that they used to, because the idea of undisputed is so far between the way that it used to, right? Like those fighters now you don't see that as often. Where it used to be very commonplace that the undisputed heavyweight champion, the undisputed champion, right? And that's a good point, Rich. But I have a question for you both, and you can decide how you want to answer this. But the idea that fighters are getting paid more with these gates and so forth has actually led to this paradigm where they're actually getting paid more for a sport that is taking away so much from them. But in doing so, they're now incentivized to not want to be the best or prove that they're the best, because the idea at the end of the day now is I don't have to risk my life as often to get that payday. And so is it fair to say that that part of it, which is benefiting the fighters, is actually lacking for the fans? And Cleve, I'll let you start.
So my take on this is kind of what Rich said. A lot of fighters are seeing other avenues to make money and to give longevity to their careers for the most part. But again, coming from the era that I come from, eight or nine guys are contenders, one champion, and you got to walk through fire to get to that number one spot. You have 2 or 3 losses coming up. That's it. You out. We don't remember who you are. But having that revenue stream and becoming these rock stars and not being the grit, it's crazy. I always bring up I always bring up Sugar Ray Robinson as my GOAT for a lot of reasons, but because of his record. The guy fought 8 or 9 times a month for a span of 10 to 12 years. Now think about that. 8 or 9 times a month when you got some guys fighting twice a year.
Which is what they're incentivized to do, though, right? Like why would they fight even more than that if they don't have to? And Rich, I want to ask you, like, if you had a kid who was up and coming in boxing, how would you struggle with this? Because you, in the way you grew up with the sport, you want to prove that you're the best. And yet the sport is not that way anymore. When, let's say, your offspring could go and be a millionaire and not have to do what Sugar Ray Robinson did, right? And fight 9 times a month. And would you struggle with that?
Well, I'm from a different era, so I mean, when you say your child, that does put a different aspect on it. So
Fair.
let's be more clear when it's my business. When I got a fighter and I got a stable of fighters, of course the goal is to keep everybody winning to make money. But the way to make the ultimate amount of money and the way to make my business the number one business is to make sure my fighters are the best. And the only way they're going to be the best is eventually I gotta fight the best. You can take some fighters and hold them off a little bit more because you're trying to let them mature. You're trying to let them grow into their size and strength. So I understand that aspect. Like maybe it's going to take them a little bit longer before I let them fight the best. But there's no such thing as never fighting the best. And then we claim we're the best. I would never allow that, because that doesn't just hurt the fighter or the sport. That hurts me. That hurts everybody, because then you got fan bases that are confused. They're gonna be like, yeah, he's the best. Who did he fight? He fought everybody. No, he didn't fight nobody yet. You can't be the best just because your fans want to see you the best. Jump in that ring.
Yeah, I was just going to say
right.
that's how I feel about Deontay Wilder. That he fought everybody in the SEC. You ain't face world competition. You can't be the best dude. Can't be. You ain't fight the best.
I mean, even now, look at Canelo. Didn't he just fight a few weeks ago? I thought I saw, and I don't even know the guy's name. But now, again, I'm more of a casual fan in that regard. But I'm saying he's supposedly one of the best fighters in the world. I'm not taking away from him, but a lot of the fighters that he has fought, a lot of the casual fans are like, I don't really know who that is.
Yeah, Canelo's the man. You got to give Canelo props on what he's done, but Canelo is at a point now he should not be fighting nobody unknown. He has the strength in boxing, the power in boxing to dictate whoever he fights. So if they come to Canelo and say, hey, this guy's a whatever number one rank, you got to fight him. Canelo can easily say, nope, I want to fight this name. They're not going to take nothing away from Canelo because he's the cash cow. If you take your belt away from him, you took a lot of money from your own organization. So Canelo has the ability to fight who he wants. So when he fights a nobody, that's just a bad mark for boxing. Don't fight no unknowns. Canelo's too big for that. Right?
I agree. I'm not taking anything away from Canelo. I I do respect his fighting, but I'm saying he's a good example of the paradigm. And to your point, Rich and Cleve, about UFC, about how they kind of do some things differently. And man, they're still ascending, in my opinion. Like UFC feels like they haven't even peaked yet, but yet they've been at the top of combat sports now for, it feels like, a decade. And yet the sky's the limit. So what are they doing different?
I think the
They
promotions.
give you they give you the fights you want every month. See, that's what they do. Every single month, UFC is going to give you the fight that you was talking about last month. If they see you fight and you the man, you're going to be fighting the champ in the next month or two. And that's why UFC is doing so great. And their fight cards, it'd be nothing but champs. You don't have like one champ and then three dudes from down the street. No, you got 3-4 champs fighting, and they be legit fights. They be legit fights. So I mean, I'm actually a UFC guy now. I'm still boxing number one, but UFC has won me over because if you see somebody who you want to jump in that ring, they're going to force them to fight.
It's a good point. And it's like, what wasn't it? Was it Jake Paul who was on the main event, and there was like a championship fight on the undercard? And I'm like, how is that happening? I was offended.
I used to be mad at Jake Paul, but I can't no longer because, again, that's boxing's fault. If y'all not going to make the fights and this man is going to promote and bring out the stars and the big names and everybody going to come see him, then that's what he's doing. I mean, more credit to the man for doing that. I don't respect, the fights that he picks and the people that he's fighting and some of the things, because I think some of it is rigged sometimes. That's just my personal opinion. But if you're going to promote things, boxing has done a horrible job over the last decade, if we're gonna pick a timeline, of not promoting fights. Rich and I come from the era of the Super Six, and for those fans that don't know what a Super Six is, it's a tournament that lasts about 2 years, a little over 2 years, and you have about eight fighters, and then of the fights, we get one champion, one lineal champion that emerges from that, and you can do it through all the weight classes to get your champion. And that way you see the fights you want to see because they pick the 8 best guys that you can get to fight.
But doesn't that benefit the sport if they do it? I understand that the fighters don't want to do it, but isn't there a shit ton of money to be made from doing something like this? So it feels like not doing it is counterproductive to what they're trying to do, which they're all trying to make money. So doesn't everybody win? Right.
To show you how unpopular that is, the last Super Six fight, the last Super Six tournament, and Rich, tell me if I got this wrong, wasn't that with Jermaine Taylor? And people don't even know who he is really nowadays.
Yep.
And Carl Frock, man, I can't
even name.
I can't even name who's in it.
You remember who won it though, right?
Who won it?
Come on. Yeah. I'm gonna give y'all a few seconds. You gotta remember who won it. He was at the fight. He was at the fight last night.
Andre Ward.
He was commentating last night. Ward won the Super Six.
Yeah, that was the last Super Six.
Ward,
that's crazy.
Yeah, Ward came in there and beat them boys up.
How long ago was that, man? That was a long time ago.
Yeah, that was some time. I can't offhand. I'm not
too
sure.
long ago.
Yeah.
That was at least 12 years ago. It was a long time ago.
You want to see me get on a hill and die on that hill is when people come at Andre Ward on social media for calling him a bum, and I'm like, listen.
Wow, they call Andre Ward a bum?
I'm not here for this. Because it's all...
Wow.
I will say this, too, for you guys. The social media stuff isn't just about the fighters trying to make more money. There are a lot of weekend warriors that I call them, and I'll look at the camera and say this. There's a lot of weekend warriors who'd never step in the ring, who have a lot of opinions about these guys going in there and risking their life in the sport of boxing. And just because you go in there and get your clock clean doesn't mean that you aren't... I mean, you have balls to even get in there to do a lot of that. So that's why with the Jake Paul stuff, I'll give you that. It is boxing's fault. But I'm not here for these fans who are jerking him off like he's revolutionizing the sport of boxing. He's killing the sport of boxing.
Just the marketing part. And again, for those fans that don't know who Andre Ward is, do your history. The man never lost. He's one of the greatest fighters, if not in my top 10 all time. He was an excellent fighter, very, very smart fighter. Fought who was in front of him, and beat a lot of big names. Andre Ward, I can't believe somebody called him a bum.
And through injury, he was a fighter who a lot of his career was slowed down because he had a lot of injuries that made him miss years. And he came back, always fought a champ and always beat a champ. Always fought a top 1 to 2 fighter, and he beat him. And like you say, he went through the Super Six. He fought some good names in the Super Six. He won the Super Six by beating Carl Froch, if you remember Carl Froch.
Yep.
real tough dude from across the water.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that Super Six was good. I'm looking at it now. He beat Frates. He beat Arthur Abraham, but a lot of people
Arthur
were scared
Abraham.
of back then.
Yes. Yeah.
Heavy handed fighter. When they
Mm-hmm.
put him in the Super Six, people was nervous. But I think when it first started, I think Jermaine Taylor was actually one of the favorite guys
To win
to
it.
make
Yeah.
it through. And I believe Foch was the one that knocked him out. I think Carl
Yeah.
Foch was the one that
Yeah.
knocked
He
out
he got beat early.
Jermaine,
Jermaine got beat early. And
and
it's
he got
crazy that
embarrassed. You know what I mean?
it's crazy that people don't remember his name. People don't remember who he is.
Well, I was about to make that point, actually. All these guys that you're talking about, there's not as many of those guys that, like, well, today's boxing fans remember all these guys that are fighting today that are just like the guys that you're talking about, right? They're not going to, because our society, everything is fleeting. Even if you're the champ, once you said you lose twice, you're done.
You're done.
Like, you don't even remember
that's
anymore.
how it is.
And that's kind of crazy, because there are some guys like Pacquiao's lost, like, what, 12 times or whatever, and everybody knows who he is. Now, that's a different story. That's maybe not the right example to be using there. But my point being is, like, you guys can pull all these names out of hats about, oh, you remember this guy, this guy, this guy, and you have stats on the guy. I remember him heavy-handed, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a lot of fighters that are not going to be remembered during this era right now because of exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
No exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point of the sport for me, and I want to hear Rich's opinion on this, is like, these up-and-coming guys, they're hungry. They're fighting for something other than just a paycheck, because for a lot of these guys, this might be their only chance.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, when we don't get to see those guys against top-notch competition to at least try to get their moment in the sun, it sucks for us as a fan, because that's the ultimate story. You want to see those underdog guys. You want to see those guys that are like, man, who is this guy? Like the Rocky stories. That's a quintessential Rocky story. Like, everybody loves that. But yet we're being robbed of it month in and month out in this sport, and it kind of sucks.
Facts.
I agree. That's right. I agree.
So, gentlemen, what do you say we talk about some real fighters? And I'm going to say this, and I want to hear your opinion on this. I think there have been two super fights this year that most people have been talking about more than any other fights. And I think that the Tank Ryan Garcia fight from, I think it was last month, is one that everybody was talking about. Your casual fan was sort of in the know about it. And then last night, or 2 nights ago, was Lomachenko and Devin Haney. And I think that that was one that was kind of talked about a little bit more. I saw a little bit more promotion for it. And I say talking about it isn't like promotion, because there's a lot of fights that happen that I don't even see promoted. But both of those fights, I think, were important for the sport, but I think they also have some commentary on where the sport is today. And I want to start with the Tank fight. And Supreme, I want to get your thoughts on the Tank Garcia fight. I know that was a while ago, but it was a pretty definitive decision. But I wanted to get your thoughts on the lead up to it, how it went, and just your expertise on what you saw in the ring.
All right, now that fight, it was a good fight to promote. They both were two young guys without a belt, but they had a good enough name to generate more money than the champion, who's Haney, in that same weight class, around that weight class. But it was a good fight on paper. Ryan had an opportunity to get more people to see him as a better fighter, maybe a real fighter, if he could have pulled the fight out. But like I told many people before that fight, it was just too many steps, too many levels above Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia didn't have a chance against Tank. Tank, too skilled, too sharp, too patient. And it was a tough fight for Ryan. Ryan did what he could do, threw punches, but with a skilled man, Tank just took his time, counterpunched him, and beat him up pretty easy. The only thing I didn't like about that fight was the stipulations that Tank and his team put on that fight. I don't like the fact that they made Ryan had that hydration clause where he couldn't even rehydrate for the fight. He had to stay at a weight that was too light for him up until fight time. And that, to deplete this man of strength shows the fear that I felt Tank shouldn't have had. Tank was good enough and by far better than Ryan, that he should just let Ryan just rehydrate like any other fighter. Come in, if he want to come in at 155 or 160, Tank should have been skilled enough to do what we saw him do. But Tank beat him. I think it's an asterisk by that fight just because Ryan wasn't at his best. Ryan also had a stomach injury. But either way, Tank was better. Tank was beating him. And I think the people liked it because they brought a lot of fans out. That was a fight that was actually good for boxing because they do have a big enough fan base on social media that it was a good turnout. And they put on a good show.
How often does that rehydration clause happen, Cleve? Because I'd never heard that.
Not often. I mean, Mayweather might have had one, right, Supreme? I think one time that I remember Mayweather had used one. back in the day, but it's rare. I mean, it's rare. I mean, obviously, we want to. What people should know about is like if the weight is is stipulation, we got to weigh in at the weight. If you won't make weight, you lose part of your purse as a penalty. So we know about that. But to tell a man he can't hydrate, that's crazy. You know, I'm in that mindset of or school of thought of like I want to beat you at your best. I don't want you to have no excuses to me to tell me, you know what, I was hurt, you know, whatever. I'm like, okay, if you hurt, then let me know so we can postpone the fight until you're not hurt. I want to beat you at your best. So there's no asterisk, there's no nothing that could tell me that I didn't beat you. So to me, I felt having a mole in the camp that was kind of bush league to get inside information that Ryan got hurt in sparring. So you know to the body. So obviously you had some intelligence there. I mean, you know, but it is again, it's the fight game. The fight game encompasses everything that you can use to better your opponent. So I can't really be mad at that, but I'm not gonna put a dude in somebody's camp. I mean, I'm not going that far with that.
I mean, I say this all the time about sports, that it's always about trying to win in the margins. Like they're always trying to do that, no matter what the sport is. They're
Steal a
trying to
signal,
do
yeah.
something, whether it's signal stealing, having a mole in there. And I get it from the integrity standpoint, you don't want that. But what does it say about Ryan that he takes the stipulation? Because obviously he felt like he had to in order to get this fight, and this was a big moment for him. But a little ballsy on his part to take that kind of a clause, knowing it's going to deplete him of a lot of power.
So two things about this. To Supreme's point about the good for boxing as far as the fan base came out, most of those fans came to see Ryan. Ryan is a big mega super IG fan. Only fight fans know who Gervonta Davis is, Tank Davis is, right? But if you put them on social media, more people would know Ryan Garcia than they would know Tank Davis. So a lot of those people that came out for the weigh-in was at the Staples Center, I think it was, and that looked like a Lakers game for a weigh-in. I said I ain't never seen people come out for a weigh-in like that. You know, that for two guys that are not heavyweights or bigger guys, or whatever. So I think Ryan had to take the fight. I wouldn't have signed the hydration clause, but obviously he wanted to make the money, and he wanted a chance at being champion. You know, beating a dude. So, you know, this is your chance. Yeah, beating a big name. Because again, up until now, the resumes didn't match up. Tank's resume is way more impressive, and Ryan just kind of said, you know what, let me shoot my shot. However handicap is going to be, I'm gonna try to make this fight.
Yeah, I think Ryan was confused. I think Ryan, whoever's in his corner, misled him on how good he was. I think he believed that he could beat Tank easy, so he was taking whatever. He was like, "Hey, just give me the money. I'm gonna jump in the ring." But you got to be smarter than that. You got to know who you jumping in the ring with. Tank is a better fighter than Ryan, so Ryan should have been no on anything that made him weaker, anything that could have slowed him down. Ryan should have said, "Hey, if you want to fight me, I ain't taking this stuff." But it was his fault, man. He took the bait. He got confused and thought he had a great chance of winning, so he felt it didn't matter what the rehydration clause was. And I was checking also to see the last person that did that was a big name, Canelo against Kovalev. Remember when Canelo fought
Oh,
Kovalev
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
Canelo was somehow seemed so much stronger than Kovalev late? The hydration clause. Kovalev
Wow.
wasn't
Yeah,
allowed to
it's
put his
not
weight
used a
in.
lot.
Yeah. And it made it so Kovalev was weak late. And it was a fight that Kovalev was winning. Old Kovalev was actually out skilling and boxing Canelo, but then Canelo hit him late, knocked him out with basically one punch, and that's what the hydration does. If you can't get your strength back, you're gonna be softer than the smaller man.
See, these are the little nuances of the fight game that a lot of casual fans really don't even understand or even think to look for. The ins and outs of these contracts have a lot to do with how a fight can go down or not go down, because it could deplete one side or the other of some advantage that they could find or have in the
That's
ring.
how they
And
do it.
yeah,
You know what's the worst
Also,
other than
also too, let me say real quick. Also too, the gloves. They do certain gloves that'll be better for the puncher or the boxer.
yeah,
The ring size.
ring
If I'm a
size? Yep,
boxer, if I'm like Floyd
14
Mayweather,
footer.
you see Floyd Mayweather rings was bigger than the
Yeah,
football field.
yeah,
You
yeah,
make sure it's going to suit you when you're the A side fighter. I want to have this, I want to have that, and it's so you can have a better advantage over your opponent. Now, I don't have a problem with the gloves. I don't have a problem with the ring size. I got a problem with rehydration. Don't don't
yeah.
don't 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 try to make the man weak and then you act like you won a legit fight. I don't.
Yeah, I was gonna preference catch weight fights. You know, when two fighters got to come one got to come down or one got to come up. It's a disadvantage to both fighters, and it's an advantage to both fighters because it takes a little bit of steam off a guy that's a big puncher to come down, and a guy that's a more speedy guy who got to gain weight to meet, and he gonna get a little slower. So yeah. I think we talked about that offline, Matt. Contracts of like I want a certain referee, I don't want certain judges. You know, I should be able to dictate who I want. You know, that's gonna help or be fair to me, versus getting somebody. I'm like, you know what, I don't like that judge. That judge never does it fair and whatnot. So
Yeah, Supreme, you should know about me that like sports business is kind of my thing. So I always bring Cleve into this discussion about the things that go into it, like that are reading between the lines of things that happen in sports. Like the stuff that happens in the ring is cool for me. And it really is. Like watching the fights and being able to break it down, looking at it analytically, I much enjoy that. But sometimes when you find out this stuff, like after you see a decision or knowing what's going to happen coming in, it does help you analyze the fight a little bit different. And I know you're somebody who scores the fights at home, so I have to think that you have to know all these things before you even start to score a fight, right?
But yeah, you want to be aware of everything that's going on, so you can you want to have a full scope of what you're looking at.
And
Because
how much?
one big thing, real quick, one big thing
Yeah.
about scoring a fight, you want to make sure you know the fighters fully, because a fighter could be doing something that you can be grading him as a positive for or as a negative. Like if a fighter is a very strong, aggressive fighter, and then he jump in the ring and the man is pushing him around and chasing him, well, then that's a negative. It's like, why is this man running around in this ring? So he's being dictated by his opponent. As opposed, if you see somebody who's a boxer doing the same thing, it becomes a positive for him. Like this man is moving around the ring and using great ring generalship, and he's outpointing the guy. So it's good to be aware of what the opponents and fighters can do, so you can judge the fight properly.
Well, you always talk about Gaddy, how he used to have a long leash because he did better when he was hurt. So like
Yeah.
they kind of let him. So if you're judging him,
yeah, he was a guy that anybody else they would have stopped it, but Gotti they gave him just enough. Like he gonna come out of it. The worse he looked, he's still in the fight. But it was just for him.
so I would agree that fight was more for the casual fans and did a lot for boxing, because I get a text from my co-host who doesn't really watch boxing, but he did tune in to that fight and was asking me questions about it. So I do agree. And I think that we need more of that, right? We need more of these fights that are going to bring not just people like us to these pay-per-views or these fights, but people that are fringe fans or somebody who used to be a fan back in the day, maybe somebody who used to watch 20 years ago and now they look at the sport and say, we never get any of these good fights. Why should I tune in? But I want to move to last night, because last night was a little bit more controversial. The first fight that we talked about, much more definitive. We knew who won that fight, easy, cut and dry. But whenever we get down to these decisions, we kind of get into where we struggle as just sports fans with these sports that are subjective. We see this in the Olympics a lot with anything that has judges, right? And boxing is that. And so last night, Devin Haney defends his championship against Lomachenko, who Lomachenko comes in at 35 years old. He has pedigree of a lot of different things, the way he fights. Haney, the young guy, the young champion, a lot of bravado. And they fight last night. Cleve and I just watched it today. And it was a great fight. But a lot of people felt like there was some not so good cooking on it. But Rich, I want to get your thoughts on it, because you did watch it live and you have had some thoughts on it. And I want to also take that fight and talk about what it says about where boxing is today with the subjective nature of judges, the kind of judges that are out there. We see their scores and think, how is this person even still employed? And I think that last night is a really good example of that. So Supreme, to you about the fight.
Now with that fight, to dive right in, one judge, if I remember, was like 116 to 112. Now that judge was a little bit off. So that's
Abe
somebody
Moretti.
you would that's somebody you would look at like, what's going on with this guy? He don't need to be there. But the other two judges, I do agree. Now my scorecard was 115 to 113. I thought Haney did very well early. Haney worked the body beautifully, and he did a good job. He won enough rounds to where Lomachenko had to fight to come back, and he got himself back in the fight, but I didn't feel he won. But that fight was such a close fight in certain rounds that, depending on how you judging it, you switch around the two, then you got Lomachenko winning. So that's a fight that's just hard to argue if they said draw Haney or Lomachenko because it was that close. But when you look at the fight, Haney's the champ. You don't want to steal a fight from the champ. I mean, a lot of people heard my man Shakur say, "Oh, Loma won." Shakur is trying to really promote his fight with Haney. He's trying to dig in Haney. And so like a lot of people went on social media and ran with that. Like, oh, we was robbed. But no, that was a close fight. That was a close fight that Loma lost. And if somebody felt he didn't, it was close enough that you can't really dispute it. But I believe Haney put enough rounds in early, worked that body. I mean, Loma wasn't even able to block the body shots. He would just lead right hand to the body. He made Lomachenko look like an amateur. He did very well. But Loma, with his speed, with his skill, he fought hard and he fought well. He did better than I thought. I actually thought Loma was going to lose that fight more decisively. I even thought he was going to get stopped. I thought he's going to, in the late rounds, I thought Haney would be young enough, strong enough to wear him down and beat him up. But Loma was actually the stronger man. He finished stronger. He looked good. But like I said, my scorecards, I felt it was 115 to 113. I thought Haney's eked it out. He eked it out enough, so they should rematch. They should do it again.
We just said that actually.
Run
That
it
this
back.
is the kind of this is the kind of fight where if you're Haney, run it back because again, I want to beat you again and prove that this wasn't a fluke. Because especially with this narrative coming out of here, like, and Haney's body language at the end of the fight, Clev and I both talked about this right afterward. It was like he doesn't walk around like a guy who seems super confident that he's going to take this away. Like there was a little bit of hesitancy there because of how things finished. And in round 11, Lomachenko was taking it to him.
It was a walk-off.
And it was.
Oh, yeah.
And I was impressed watching it with all the body work at the beginning. Normally that slows mortals down. It doesn't matter who you are, you get enough body work and it takes everything away from you. Guys generally tend to fade. And Lomachenko's coming back. And not just coming back and getting like scoring shots. I mean, that left hand, that straight left hand, Haney didn't have an answer for it. It was like 5 rounds in a row. Just we're seeing his head snap back. And so it was a really good fight. And I actually was thinking, depending on who you like and depending on how you feel that day, you could have graded certain rounds differently and had a different outcome. And that's why I think you need to run that back. Hopefully we do get it. But Cleve, I want to get your thoughts on that fight because I know you're a big Loma guy, and I am too, to an extent, but I try to be unbiased in my assessment.
So hats off to Devin Haney. I thought he fought a great fight. To Supreme's point, worked the body really well. I mean, he made a living on working the body. I mean, you never see Lomachenko getting caught to the body that easy, that often. So he did, hats off to his training camp for getting him ready to do that. I still don't think Haney has power, and it showed that he never hurt Lomachenko, although, him being the older fighter and Haney being the younger fighter. One of the things that I take away from it is the judges. I hate when it gets to the judges. I mean, I'm not a big fan of seeing people get hurt, but knockouts are a part of the sport. It's like NASCAR for the crashes. You go and kind of see a wreck. But David Moretti is a really questionable judge, man. Like he scored in the Tank fight. Tank knocked down Garcia, and he scored that fight. Normally it would be a 10-8 round. He scored that fight even. He scored that round even. And that's questionable for me to have a guy sitting in that chair that's going to see the fight 112, 116 when two people saw it 115, 113. That's crazy. That's crazy to me that what rounds did you give away or give to Haney? Because, again, I didn't think Haney took the fight all the way out. Loma could have probably did a little bit more in the earlier rounds from what I saw. But it was a close fight. They should run it back. I think the controversy or the conspiracy is it's always around the younger fighter that they can make more money with going into the future. Lomachenko, by any standards, is an ancient fighter. 36 years old, 35 years old, 402 amateur fights, 18 professional fights. It's a lot of boxing, man. It's a lot of boxing. And at some point, you're not going to make money with him. If he becomes a champion again, how many years he got? Maybe 3 or 4, if that. Haney's young. I mean, Haney got another 10 years. And then you also got Shakur out there. You got a couple of guys out there, actually, that could still, get this belt. So I hope that they do run it back, but for some reason these guys will exercise these rematch clauses. I'm like, give yourself some insurance and say, you know what? just in case I lose, I want to be able to go back. Unless I get knocked out. If I get knocked out, nobody wants to see that again. If you get knocked out, no rematch clause for you. Like you got caught.
No, but if it goes to the judges and the decision does not go your way, as the champion, I would like to think you want to prove it to people, because the perception is that Haney was gifted this decision. And now I think that's mostly social media driven, which is why when I was looking through Twitter and I saw all of that, I thought that's not necessarily what happened. Like, you need to watch the fight to be able to say that.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, a lot of the social media narrative is from people who don't really know what they're watching. And I don't mean that to throw shade at anybody who's listening or watching this, but we all have studied film and looked at different things. And I think it's easy to say, oh, he was robbed, or it's a conspiracy. And it doesn't always have to be that. It can just be that this is a subjective sport and you're going to get decisions that you don't agree with. And last night was one of those times. So how best to figure that out? Fucking run it back again.
Mm-hmm. Boxing is one of those sports where in basketball, in the championships, you got the best of 7. World Series, same kind of thing. But in boxing, you can't have an off night. You cannot have an off night. Off night can mean title, contention, or both.
That's right.
You can't have an off night. You got guys going out there, fight with a broken arm, broken thumb, broken hand, shoulder tore, but they're going to fight. You got guys fight that they're sick. My boy's 6, but he rests in peace. He fought when he was lactose intolerant. This is like a funny story. Lactose intolerant, goes into a fight, has a milkshake before the fight, and he got to go to the bathroom, like round 5, 6. And real bad, he's having stomach cramps. I'm like, bro, why did you have a milkshake?
That's crazy.
Yeah. But rest in peace, 6. My boy Andrew Lewis, he was a WBC welterweight champion at one point, so good joint.
Now, here's a question for you. Now, we always get the commentators, like I think we got Max on the broadcast giving his scoring of it, but yet we never seem to get that transparency with the judges. Now, how great would it be if we could get that mid-fight interview with one of the judges, hear what they're saying, right? Because we don't get that transparency. They give in their scorecards. It's now on Twitter. Everybody knows that they scored it, but they don't know what they're seeing. Wouldn't that actually be a great part of the broadcast to give just a little bit, right? Just a little bit, like after a big round or after a close round, you talk to one of the judges and they say, well, this is what I was seeing. It's like, oh, okay, maybe I didn't see that. And because you got to remember, their vantage point is different than yours. You're on television now. Everything's in 8K, and you got 17 billion cameras there that are switching angle. You're basically like standing in the ring with them. But these judges are sitting ringside stationary, and they only have one vantage point.
You know what? Rich, educate me on this. Is CompuBox still around, or was that an HBO thing?
The CompuBox is them counting all the punches per round. And HBO could have maybe started, but everybody does that. Okay. Everybody counts. Yeah, everybody counts.
Because my boy Harold Letterman.
Okay, Jim.
Rest in peace. That was my dude. That was my dude.
Yeah, but again, like, he would tell you what he saw.
Yeah.
Right? But that was, again, somebody who's not scoring the fight for real. And every other athlete gets a microphone shoved in their face after the game, but they don't have to. They're like, peace, I'll go.
Let me say this. Now, they did adopt that some years ago with, I forgot what belt it was, but they was making it so throughout the fight, you would get an update on what the judges had to score at a certain round.
Yeah,
and
I remember.
They kind of just erased that and ran from that. I think that was a very good thing. What was you gonna say?
No, I think I know what fight that was, and I know why they erased it. It was Rigondeaux Donaire, and it was such a blowout. And Donaire was their man. They's like, no, we can't have it. We can't do this again.
and that's the reason why they need to do it though, because that's going to stop them from cheating. Because you don't want them to take an extra 5 minutes to tally up the scorecard after the fight, and then they did their magic on it. If we can get them to give us every 3 rounds what they already done scored. Now they can't go back and change nothing. I think that would be a great aspect of boxing to stop all that shadiness, a lot of the shadiness. Because tell me right now what you got. And like you said, to your point, speak to one of the judges every 3 rounds. Let all 3 judges get a chance to talk somewhere through that fight so we can get their perspective. What are they seeing? What do they believe is happening? And I think that'll make them a little bit more honest if we can show exactly what they're doing and hear what they feel.
Indeed.
Yeah, but to me, it feels like from a production standpoint, that also adds to the broadcast too, because one of the things I loved is when they started getting those corner insights. You started hearing what the corner was talking about in between rounds, and sometimes you and I would watch a fight and the guy's like, just keep doing what you're doing, and we're like, oh, that's not good advice.
That was a staple back in the day. I mean, Suprema remember when when they told Meldrick Taylor against Chavez, go out, I'm like, he's so far ahead. You don't need a knockout. Just to survive the round. He goes out for looking for the knockout and gets beat. You know, Tito Trinidad a couple times. I'm like, what are they telling this dude? Like, what fight are y'all watching? You know, give him instructions. You know, let him know what you're seeing. But that was always good to see a corner.
Unfortunately, yeah, it's a great thing to see the corner, but unfortunately, we get to see that insight on a corner who has a great fighter, and you think the corner's good, but they're actually not. The fighter's just great. And when that fighter gets some type of adversity, now you see that corner, hey, just keep doing what you're doing. Dude lost like 8 rounds in a row. You know,
Well,
eyes
that's
are
why
closed.
Ryan
It's
fired
just
his
crazy.
trainer after the fight.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Because a lot of these trainers, they just go off the victories of the fighter. They don't really have that foresight or the insight to be like, this is what we need to change. This is what I see right now. They
Adam
basically just
Gase.
come in there. They come with a game plan. They just run with it. But you got to have the ability to be on the go and change it. Like, you know what we was doing? That ain't working. So I need
Yeah.
you to move more. I need you to come in more. I need you to block more or grab more. You know, tell the guy something that can help him change what's going on with the flow of the fight. But a lot of them don't do it.
We give Lomachenko's dad a lot of credit for that.
Oh.
Like the Linares fight, torn labrum, he gets knocked down, and this is not something that they're used to, but basically he just takes out the playbook, flips to the page, okay, this is what this happens, this is what we're going to do, and not every corner does that. I mean, we have definitely seen it. There was a heavyweight fight we were watching, and the guy had a broken right hand. They're like, just use your left. And we're like, are you kidding me? Like, that's your advice? Like,
Thank God the guy had power that he was fighting.
the
Thank
advice
God.
should be like, here's the towel. Let's pick it up. This is just not your day. And said, yeah, use your left. And we're both like, he's going to get somebody killed in that ring. But to me, it just adds to the element of it to where, again, and the casual fan doesn't feel like this is rigged. Because what I'm afraid of is that this social media narrative, and we know this in this country, social media takes over everything. Something gets posted on social media. Everybody believes that that's the truth. It is what it is. Fake news, whatever it is you want to call it. And now you have all these people who tuned in, maybe even bought the pay-per-view, and are scrolling through their phone and saying, oh, it's rigged. So boxing's rigged. So why the hell should I watch it? I'll just go to watch UFC. Great cards, great fights. I never a shadow of a doubt. And that is hurting the sport. I just don't understand why the sport is so anti some of these things that aren't going to hurt it. They're only going to help it. Like, I don't understand this.
But it's what I said earlier. There's no regulatory body. You know, there's no. I mean, Supreme will tell you, like, boxing's been around. I mean, it's been around since the Greeks. But as a sport, as an organized sport, since the late 1800s, right? Few rule changes, but by not having a governing body, or even having, like, these fighters don't even have, like, they don't have pensions, they don't have any health insurance, they don't. So a lot of things goes into that, like why they make a decision of fighting who they want to fight and ducking whoever they want to duck or whatever it is. But the sport just does not have somebody to tell you got to do this, or if you don't do it, you know, that's it. We come from that era where you got stripped if you didn't. When that Ring magazine came out back in the day, and you wasn't in the top 25 dudes, you wasn't in the top 15 or top 10, nobody knew about you. And you had to beat people to get to the top. You just didn't get a title shot because you was popular. You got a title shot because you was a dog. You worked hard and you did your thing. You know, it's comical because I'm always gonna love the sport no matter what. But I mean, they're archaic at this point when it comes to some of the things. But again, it's money, it's revenue. Now these fighters are getting part of the gate, which is something that back in the day they didn't really get that.
Why do I see you as a young teenager and somebody says, you know what fighter I like is this guy, and you pull out Ring magazine? Yeah, he's not in here. Who the hell's that?
Yeah,
I'm not doing that.
Supreme will tell you that was the Bible. Like Ring magazine. There was three magazines, three publications, but Ring, even the fighters was like wanting to be in Ring. They wanted to be that guy. Like if you wasn't in the top 15, man, you really wasn't, and you was nobody. And any one of those guys in the top 10 could have been champion.
So, Supreme, I'm going to look toward the future, and not just for this year, but as you see it, maybe even for the next 5 years of the sport, because I think we all agree that it is in some trouble. Is it possible that the sport could go under at any point in time? And do you see that as a realistic possibility, or there'll always be just enough to keep it going because it's such a long-standing sport and it really is passed down from generation to generation?
Yeah, but boxing is never going to completely fall off, you know, because long as we keep keeping some stars in there guys that generate the revenue they generate. Yeah, boxing generates way too much money for it just to disappear. It's a lot of money involved. So it's going to be there. It's just not going to be the same from what we experienced growing up until they make these guys fight each other. If everybody going to be scared to fight, if you're going to have a bunch of Bud Crawfords and Earl Spencers who you think they the best, but they don't fight each other, it's going to always hurt the sport. But as long as we still got people fighting and we still watching every weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the sport going to be around. And it's going to keep making money. It's just like the hardcore fans is going to be hurt because we know it could do better.
What are some fights that you'd like to see over the next, let's say, 18 months?
Oh, wow. Well, I just said, I definitely want to see, Bud and Spence. I want that fight needs to be done. That fight needs to be done. And that's like the main fight I want to see. Now, as for like newer guys, I want to see some new guys get it. But let me see, what's big fight? I would like to see Canelo fight my dude Benavidez. Them two need to make that fight. I would like to see Bivol, the guy that beat Canelo, fight what's that other guy in that division? I forgot his name. It's something B. I forget his name, but it's another light heavyweight who's all knockouts, great record, and Bivol needs to unify with him. That's a great fight, and I think those are two real big mega fights that I think we need to see. Bivol unify, Canelo fight Benavidez, Spence and Bud. Heavyweight wise, they was talking about, it kind of fizzled out. They was talking about doing a heavyweight tournament, somewhat like a tournament. They was going to let Tyson Fury fight Usyk. They was going to let Wilder fight Joshua, and that's supposed to be in December. Wilder got caught up with a gun charge, and I hope that don't mess up that December thing. Yeah, he got caught with a gun charge about a couple weeks ago.
Kill me, man. These dudes kill me.
But they was going to fight. Yeah, they was going to fight overseas for big money, and the winner between those two fights is going to fight each other. And of course, it'll be undisputed because when Fury and Usyk fight, the winner has all the heavyweight belts. So that's 4 belts, undisputed champion. And they was going to fight the winner between Wilder and Joshua. And it's nice because we would get the fights we want to see. Because even though Joshua looks broken, I always want to see Wilder and Joshua fight. So we get to see that. We get to see the unification with Usyk and Fury. And then whoever wins, man, we get to see them. So those are probably like the biggest fights, the biggest paydays I would like to see, this year.
That just shows you, too, how much of a missed opportunity Ruiz had when he had the belt.
Oh, man, that dude's golden ticket,
you're talking about that 4 heavyweights. That's all we're talking about. Like, that's all we want to see. And he had the belt. He had the chance.
Golden ticket.
And gave it away. Gave it away. And this is a sport, man, where this might be your only chance. Only chance. And to me, it comes down to having the right people in your camp. And we've talked about it on here. Your corner may seem good or your entourage might seem like they're great buddies, but it's a business.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you are here to make money. This is your livelihood. You fight for a living. And you got to have everything in place to make sure that happens. Like, if I would ever become heavyweight champion, I would do everything I could to not lose that belt. And if that meant getting up every day at 5 a.m. and eating nothing but chicken and rice so that I was ready to go. What was it you talk about? Bernard Hopkins, always ready to go.
Always ready to go. That dude was he walked around fight ready.
That's right.
Fight ready.
I kind of like that too. Like, you're out grocery shopping and somebody's like, "Hey, B-Hop, I'm ready."
Yeah, he's ready. I'm like, yo, just who am I fighting in 2 weeks? I'm ready to go. I'm at weight.
2 hours. He's ready to go. He's like, "Let's go. Let's weigh it. Let's get it out. Let's get out." And that it makes me sad, but I want to see Fury and Usyk because Usyk kind of came up from cruiserweights, right? And he did what he had to do. He beats Joshua. Didn't he beat him twice? Beat him twice. Or was it once? He beat him twice. Yeah. So they ran it back. He beat him again. And Fury, I don't want to say he's ducking the guy, but they're not making this fight. And this is like, I would actually probably pay to watch this heavyweight fight. Now, if they do this tournament, I'm totally in for it. Totally in for it.
They need it.
Yes.
It would be big for the sport.
The heavyweight champion used to walk into the biggest clubs in New York City and be like, "Right over here, sir."
Yo, the last unified champ that I remember was Mike. Mike was the last feared unified champion. All the belts, even the ones that didn't even matter. The WBO and all that was in the back. Like, yo, they just going, I'm gonna wear the 3 straps that count. WBC, IBF, WBA. It's on my waist. I'm walking in with that. Everything else, I just got them because I'm collecting them like Thanos. You know what I'm saying? I'm just collecting these belts or whatever it is. But, After Mike lost, they broke the belts up, and it's never been the same. There was one time, and this is why I don't like heavyweight fights anymore. There was 7 heavyweight champions. I never heard of a sport that got 7 individual duels, and 6 of them were European, meaning like all over. There was no one American champion, and probably had like the lowest belt at the time. Like, that's crazy.
Well, before we get to the end of the show here, I want to remind everybody who's watching on YouTube and listening that if you have a fight that you want to see or you have an opinion on anything we've talked about today, do not forget to call or text the show. Area code 703-718-6314 is the number. I'll repeat that again. Area code 703-718-6314. Call or text. Give us your opinion. Now, Supreme, I'm going to do something. Every time we record here, Cleve is a man who likes to tell stories. He's a storyteller. And he always gives me this little nugget of history. And a guy that he talks about, he's like, hey, remember this guy? Or you should go look this guy up. And so I want to do Cleve's obscure fighter. And I don't mean obscure to you two. I mean obscure to the casual fans who maybe don't remember guys from years past or decades past. So, Cleve, I want to give you the floor to give everybody an education on your obscure fighter of this episode.
Actually, Supreme and I talked about this earlier today. Timmy Witherspoon. He was a great fighter, great heavyweight in the 80s. One of the guys that got ducked a lot. And I don't know if it's because of his style. You could never look good against him. He wasn't a big banger per se, but he was an excellent boxer. And he lost 13 times, but of the 13 times, I think I had to look this up to remember this. He only got knocked out 4 times in them 13 losses over his 55 fight career. He lost 13 times, but only knocked out 4 times out of them 13 times. And this is the era of early Mike, Goon Mike, and this is the early era of a lot of killers in that division. Timmy Witherspoon, he had a great fight against Larry Holmes that you need. It's must-watch TV. Jump on YouTube. Every once in a while, I jump on YouTube, and I just watch an old fight from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. I just watch an old fight just to, Friday night, I'm not doing nothing. I'm just going to sit and watch a fight. But the thing about Timmy, because Don King used to promote big, as we know, in the 80s and 90s. And the thing was that Don controlled a lot of the fighters, and he didn't really control Timmy Witherspoon. And Timmy never got a shot. And I think it's because fighters didn't like to fight a guy that's going to be skilled. He's going to outbox them. He had a good chin where he didn't get knocked out. I think Rich remembers this fighter pretty well. Timmy Witherspoon. What'd you think of Timmy Witherspoon, Rich?
Now, Tim Witherspoon was my guy. I was a big fan of Tim. Tim had a lot of skill, like we spoke about before. He was one of the heavyweights that had the skill level of a smaller man, similar to like a middleweight, similar to like a super middle. He can power both hands, good jab, body, head, hooks to the body, hooks to the head. Very skilled fighter. Tim Witherspoon was the man.
He was like a Chris Bird.
Appreciate his fight.
He was like Chris Bird, but with better hands. With better hands.
Bigger, stronger.
Yeah, bigger, stronger Chris Bird.
Chris Bird was a blown up light heavyweight.
Yeah.
Tim Witherspoon was all heavyweight. Tim Witherspoon
Bonafide.
all heavyweight.
And there you go, Cleve's obscure boxer. One of the great things about technology today, you talked about YouTube, being able to look up literally everything, including Tim Witherspoon highlights. And of course, you can look up this show and the Iceman and Coach Sports Show. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever it is that you are watching or listening. Gentlemen, it has been a pleasure, but I want to give you the floor one last time. Supreme, any parting thoughts for our loyal listening boxing fans?
I would just say, boxing is a great sport. Boxing gives us a lot of fun, and you just got to stick with it. You just got to, spend your money, check it out. You're going to enjoy it. We got big fights on the horizon, and as long as you stick with it, you're going to have fun. Boxing is a great sport.
I agree. And I want to thank everybody for taking out a little bit of time. Life is pretty fast these days. Everybody has a lot going on. And so for you to take just a small portion of your day, your week, your month, your year to listen to anything that we do here, it's humbling for me, and I know it feels good for you guys too. But before we get out, a little bit of administrative stuff. Don't forget to support the Matty Ice Media Network, where you can find this guy on the Manual and Political Football every single week. You can listen to other shows, including Iceman and Coach, like my other sneaker podcast, Fire Footwear. And also, I want to remind everybody that this Iceman and Coach thing and everything that we're doing here at the Cornermen, this is not just the main show. We're going to be bringing you a lot of different content over the next 6 months. Boxing, amateur wrestling, baseball, you name it. We're trying to give you a menu of content for you to be able to choose things and just decide what you want to watch and how you want to watch it or listen to it. So I want to thank everybody again for showing up this week, gentlemen. It has been a pleasure recording with the two of you. And from everybody here at the Cornermen, this is the Cornermen. We'll see you next time.